Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Woodburn Accountants and Advisors China webinar series on what you need to know about investing in the Chinese market. The whole purpose of this week's webinar series was to provide information to companies that are at the point of incorporating their entities in China and providing all the various points that require decision making prior to actually going through the application procedure to set up the company. So on Monday, we were referencing the process to set up a company and then looking at the decision of how to create your business scope, how to create your company name in Chinese. On Tuesday, we were looking at what is registered capital, what is total investment, how to create those numbers via a budget. On Wednesday, we were looking at location. What is a registered office address and its legal and tax purposes and consequences on your journey. Yesterday, we were looking at how to decide on a shareholder as well as appoint people within the corporate management of the company. And finally today, one of the last steps that is vital to creating your company in China is how to open your corporate bank account. Now, as there are more than 50% of you that have joined on the previous webinar sessions, and as I know a lot of you already, I'm not going to go through this slide in too much detail. Just for those that I am not familiar with, please do tell me, because it always gives me a nice background on who you are, whether you are simply a newbie, a startup, or an experienced China hand to China. Newbies are those that have not done anything with China and you're basically on here trying to gain an education. Those that are in the startup phase, you've been transacting with China for a number of years, either through an entity of your own or just simply from your head office. And the experienced China hands are those that have been residing in China for a number of years and have been managing companies in China for a number of years. So again, over 50% of you that are on here today, I know you. And you've been interacting with me throughout the week. But for those of you that have just joined for today's session, please do interact and let me know who you are. All right, so just technical side of things. I cross my fingers, it is day 5. We haven't had any technical problems in the last 5 days, and let's hope that today will remain the same. Just briefly, if I run into any technical issues, it does require about 30 seconds to 1 minute for me to pop back on. And to reboot the system. And so please, I will be coming back on to finish the recording. Completely understand if some of you are on time constraints, but just remember there is going to be the link to the recording later on. For those of you that have technical issues, I can't help you during this period as I'm presenting. So just know if you get booted off and you can't reconnect or you have sound issues, the recording will be up on the YouTube channel later on today, and a link will be provided on that. Throughout this week's presentation, the Q&A has probably been the most exciting part, especially because you can interact, you can ask questions, you hear from other people that are on. Please do interact. This is, again, a complimentary webinar. It's 60 minutes of your time spent. Use it wisely. If you have any doubts or questions or clarifications that are needed, ask away. And just know you can always jump on a 15-minute call with me. So this is me. My name is Christina Kohler-Colucci. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. And I've got 17 years of corporate service and compliance experience in the Chinese market, specifically based out of Shanghai. And my focus for 17 years has been on inbound investment into the Chinese market. And I've helped foreign investors with their pre-investment strategies. So pre-investment for me is defined as not having an entity yet. It's the period prior to having an entity in China. So their pre-investment strategies, their pre-investment advisory, as well as then their implementation and their growth strategies at the point that they are implemented. I'm also a founder or creator of the China Roadmap methodology, where every month I do this China Roadmap method because I'm encouraging people to understand that their companies will go on a journey in China And in order to make sure that you are leading your company into a performing business, you've got to go on this roadmap, which highlights basically 3 major milestones that your company will go through and 9 superpowers that you as a leader need to obtain in order to make sure that your company remains on track. These are usually very interactive. This is a usually very interactive webinar. So please do sign up for it. It's going to happen next Tuesday. If you haven't joined one of these before, I'm going to make this one a little bit different, where I will be giving worksheets so that it guides people in a little bit of a better format. So you can register through this link or on our website, woodburnglobal.com/events. Actually, I will quickly just add that into the chat section, so it makes it easier for people to also know what other events are coming up and what other topics we're going to be working on. So what are we covering today? And actually, I didn't put a slide on this, but I do have a question for all of you. You are all currently in your home jurisdictions, and whether you think about it from a personal perspective or whether you think about it from a corporate perspective, I now want your feedback. How much time and consideration did you go through in choosing your banking partner? All right, simple question, and you can answer it from a personal or from a corporate perspective. I don't mind, but give me some feedback. Type in a lot or type in none at all. I'm hoping, obviously, that the answer will be a lot, but please give me this feedback. How long did it take for you to choose your banking partner in your home jurisdiction? Did you interview a lot of banks? Did you meet with a lot of banks? Did you analyze their banking capabilities and how it would suit your company? So Tanya's saying a lot, and yes, she did a lot of research on it. So Tanya's the only one that's answered me. Come on, guys, give me some feedback. Hari is saying a lot. Okay. Anybody else? I know it's Friday. Come on, let's spike up some energy. So Youngie, very honest, said not a lot. Youngie, I would love to know how you did go about doing that, if you say not a lot. Anybody else? So Frankie said a lot. Fantastic. So, okay, besides Youngie, everybody is actually saying a lot. And I'm getting the impression that when you say a lot, it means you've also done a lot of research. The same is going to apply when you go to China. This is my disclaimer. I'm a corporate service provider in China. I'm not your banker. All right? I'm not the one that should be choosing which is the best bank for you. I can guide you. I can give you this presentation today, and I can tell you what options are available. I can even pass you to some of my banking partners and network that you can speak to them, but I'm not going to be the one who's choosing your bank. Okay? And this is the biggest mistake when companies go into China, is they make the assumption that the service provider or the lawyer will be the one who guides them in the account process and is the decision maker in choosing the bank. We're not. Okay? Big disclaimer there, guys. We're not the ones. But what our role should be is advising you. It's telling you what banks are available, what are the pros and cons of those banks, and for you to develop a communication channel from wherever you're sitting in the world to those banks in China. That's my role. That's my job. Okay? And I'm going to explain all of that because when I entered the market, we didn't do a lot of research. And we just went with a logical choice. And I'm going to share with you, I'm going to be the case study on today's webinar. And I'm going to be explaining to you the difficulties that I ran into over the last 17 years with banking. Okay? So there's a lot to go through. And I apologize, I am going to be using a lot of technical terms. So again, if there's something that you don't understand or you're not clear on, please, please, please add that in the Q&A or jump on a call with me for me to help you to understand that, okay? So setting up a company in China. So ultimately, I could have left it at these next 3 slides. because this is all about the account opening process. But what I want people to understand is that you should not be choosing your bank account based on how easy or difficult it is to open the account, because you're developing a long-term relationship with that bank. What is more critical is after the account opening, what happens with that bank, okay? But everyone's so fixated on the setting up process, and they choose the banks based on that versus the long-term relationship, which is something I get so frustrated about, because then I get feedback 6 months later saying, oh, Christina, I mean, sitting in the UK, they need my passport for everything. And, you know, I knew about it, but I didn't realize how inefficient this was going to be. Can we now change banks? Ha ha ha. For certain things, you can't change your bank account. So you got to make that decision properly from the beginning. All right. So when you are going through the incorporation process and you obtain your business license, your CA certificate, your company chops, then you go to the bank, okay? But prior to that, actually right now, all of you that are on here today, a good portion of you are looking actually to set up in China. So this is your current action plan. This is your homework. Which bank are you going to choose? And the main portion of this webinar today will be giving you those explanations on what the banking system is like in China, okay? So what we need to do is let our clients do their homework, communicate with at least 2 to 3 different banks to get an understanding of how easy or difficult the communication is, as well as how easy or difficult all of the ongoing operational activities will be for transactions that are going through your China account. Our job as the corporate service provider is to get the document list from whichever bank you choose and to facilitate that as quickly and easily as possible in terms of what documents are needed, besides the certificates that are issued in China, okay? So we get all those documents ready and prepared, and then we inform the bank once the business license is issued, and we go and submit them in originals. Now, because of COVID-19, all right, the banks require a Zoom conference call to meet the legal representative who shows their original passport on that conference call. The video will be recorded and filed as an important document within your file at the bank, okay? This is why yesterday's presentation was critical, because when you choose whomever is going to be the legal representative, they are also the representative at the bank for the account opening process and any issue that arises with the bank, not from an operational perspective, but from a higher level, a higher hierarchy, okay? But there are places, which I've now actually discovered with a company like Shenzhen, where some local banks still require you to meet in person, even though there is COVID and there are border control systems where you have to show your original passport. In Shanghai, it's not at all like this at all. I know in Beijing as well, it's not like this at all. In Wuxi, we set up with HSBC, it was not like this at all. So when talking about Shenzhen, that's with the majority of the banks, and it's because of the Shenzhen government versus it's related to the local government policy versus the bank policy. But there are some bank exceptions that will allow you to do it through a Zoom call. Now, point 5 is the most critical, okay? Point 5 is new since August 2020, where now the bank is required by the People's Bank of China to also visit your registered office address to prove that you are in an operational location and not a virtual office location. This is a brand new step, which is also why on day 3, I was highlighting the importance that your registered office address should be your operational address. Okay, so I'll tell you the experience of a client of mine in Shanghai. I highlighted on Wednesday one of these very unique opportunities where a building in Shanghai in the Chengning district has preferential tax policies if you lease in that building. And so my client set up in there, we were able to register his company at a working station, which is very unique as well, because normally it has to be a room with 4 walls. And the bank came to visit. So what was very fortunate, because it is actually a semi-virtual location, he's not based at that workstation, all right, and he has no employees yet, that actually the property developer of that building took the bank on a tour, explained everything related to the building, showed the work desk that is for his company, and the bank took photos. So they're also required to take pictures and photos, and then they approved it. But we were really nervous because we had started the process of registering this company prior to August. The bank account opening was in August, just as this new regulation came out. I think for this bank, it was one of the first visits that they had done themselves. And we were really worried that this was not going to pan out and we wouldn't be able to open the account. But in the end, everything turned out fantastic. Photos were taken and it was all approved. So be prepared that the bank will be required to make those visits. Now, the whole bank account opening process can take between 25 and 30 working days for the full capital account to be open and the renminbi basic account to be opened. All right, and I'll explain what those accounts mean later on in today's presentation. Does it take longer than 25 to 30 working days? Yes. I've never had it less than that amount because the bank is required to do a KYC compliance process, a know your client compliance process, to basically do a background check on the legal rep as well as on the shareholder. And so that's why it takes so long. And some banks require more time to go through that KYC process. So it could potentially be more than that, okay? All right, so then your bank account is opened, your capital account and your maybe basic. But then you need to open your online banking operation. That's not included in that timeline, okay? That's a separate application, which usually takes an additional 10 working days. And one of the key things that you have to think about that I highlighted yesterday in terms of corporate management was how are you going to operate the bank accounts? Who is going to have access to what? And keep in mind, if key tokens are issued by the bank, which every bank issues key tokens in China, you will need to send those to the authorized people who are going to operate those accounts. So that might be somebody locally, but it could also be your CFO overseas. And one thing that we've been running into difficulties is key tokens have batteries, and sending those out through DHL or FedEx can be tricky. I've got 2 key tokens that are on the way to me right now. And luckily with DHL, we've had to show them the key tokens. We've had to say that they're for the bank account openings. We've had to file a separate insurance form for it, and they're on the way now. But be prepared that you might run into difficulties with the shipment of those key tokens, okay? But the online banking is an extra application procedure, all right? Then capital is remitted from the shareholder into the capital account, okay? And this is where nothing is easy. This is where, in order to use the capital initially, you cannot just transfer the capital from the capital account to the renminbi basic account to pay off expenses. You first need to show a few months of proof of payments that have to be made, such as office rent, salaries, or any other recurring additional expenses, before you can exchange the capital from the capital account to the renminbi basic account, which means you go to the bank, you show your lease agreement, you show your employment contracts or a payroll breakdown, or you show third-party supplier contracts that are recurring to show proof that there are recurring funds that have to be continuously paid. Usually you have to do this for a period of two to 3 months, and then you can exchange the capital from the capital account to the renminbi basic account. I know it is a pain in the ass, pardon my language, but banking in China is not easy. And that's like that with any bank. So what I want people to remember as I'm going through the remainder of today's presentation is the following. Do not choose your banking partner based on the account opening process, because once that account is open, you got to manage the account, okay? And therefore, and that's my assumption when people are typing in that they've spent a lot of time choosing their banking partner, they're realizing that this is a long-term partnership with the bank. And that partnership will last for the validity of your organization, okay? So don't take this decision lightly. Don't put that on the shoulders of the lawyers or the corporate service providers. This is your homework. This is your company. You can fire corporate service providers and lawyers at any point in time. And you know, if they are the contacts to the bank, what are you going to do? You have to be that contact. You have to be that communicator with that bank, okay? So how are we going to go ahead and choose your banking partner in China? All right, so let me give you a breakdown. So foreign investors can establish accounts with, generally speaking, any bank. So you've got the international banks that have local presence. I've made a list there of basically the top ones that, you know, I've collaborated with in the past. And then you got the local ones. And for the local ones, I've just listed, again, the bigger ones, right? So Bank of China, ICBC, Bank of Communications, you know, there's a huge list, basically, of what you can choose. So you have an option. So I guess that's the first decision-making step for you is, do I go with an international bank or do I go with a Chinese bank? Okay. Now, we need to analyze what your banking needs are in China. So the first thing is analyzing what will be the nature of your business transactions. Are you predominantly going to be transacting on the domestic market, or are you going to be predominantly transacting on an international basis with overseas companies? Because then you might have different decision-making processes in terms of which bank you want to choose. If it's predominantly Chinese domestic market focused, you may want to go with a local Chinese bank because there's a stronger branch network, there's more convenient services, you'll find that your vendors and customers are using those banks, so it makes the time lag of the actual remittances much faster. However, if you are then focusing on more international transactions, you may think to yourself, I'll work with an international bank and my first step there will just be using the bank that I'm currently using in my home jurisdiction. Okay. Another analysis for you would be, you know, besides the actual transactions, if my company is simply going to be a cost center. But when you are considering whether your China business is solely going to be a cost center, if you are a startup in China, that might happen. That might be your business model, that for the first 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, it will be purely a cost center. You're not really going to be generating revenue. So why not just go with an international bank that I already have a relationship with, right? And just transfer from the shareholding company the registered capital, and if the registered capital gets used up, just have service agreements back and forth, okay? But you're not going to be a cost center forever. And again, this is the short-term vision that a lot of companies have. You might not be generating revenue initially, but what happens when you do generate revenue? Do you need a more convenient bank at your fingertips? Okay, and this is where you've got to ask the questions to the bank and discuss your business plan with them to see whether they are the right fit for you in terms of the services and products that they can offer you. Okay. Do you need a loan? All right. This is also something big. And I'm talking about when I say loan, it could be a loan from overseas. It could be a loan domestically. Do you need a loan from a bank? If that is the case, you probably will have better chances with a Chinese bank. Obviously, you will have to have a certain period of activity in order to be able to obtain a loan locally, right? Because there's no collateral to you. They don't know you. You're brand new in the market. You haven't even transacted yet. but over time, it will probably be easier to get that loan from a Chinese bank versus an international bank. Something I didn't add here was trade financing capabilities. Do you need that? So a lot of the local banks offer trade financing capabilities after a certain period of operation. Again, they need to get to know you. They need to know the volume of transactions that are running through the company. And it takes time to build that relationship, right? But you got to ask, because there are definitely some international banks that don't offer that service or that product. So you've got to think and analyze, what do I need from my bank now? Might be very small amount of services, and what will I need potentially from the bank later on? Let's discuss if they have those capabilities. Okay. Another is, if you decide to go with a smaller bank, be sure to convey to the relationship manager the demands that you need from that bank. Okay, and you got to do that all prior to opening that account. Okay, so a lot of decisions have to be made. The next one, which for me is very important, and you guys might all laugh about this, but it's location of the bank. Okay, you got to choose your registered office address. That is going to be your operational office address. Because a lot of the functions with your bank need to be done in person, my biggest advice would be to choose a bank and a bank branch that is walking distance from your office, so that whoever is operating that account has easy access to that bank, making it efficient and convenient. You don't want a staff member to be taking a taxi or a metro for 1 hour to get to a bank branch just to submit documents. It's a waste of time, okay? So when you are choosing your registered office address, which, as I highlighted on Wednesday, should be your operational office address, you are choosing a bank branch that is a good, honestly, no more than a 20-minute walking distance one-way type of time frame. And you've got to look at that circumference and see what bank branches are in that location. Okay, that's homework for you guys. Your corporate service provider may be able to help you on that, to understand and break that down for you, but that is homework for you, okay? To understand what is there. So something that I want you to be aware of when you're talking to the bank branches is, if you are in a CBD area, you will find that the bank branches in those locations will be overcrowded, particularly at lunchtime, and will be subject to long waits. You cannot imagine, when I used to run my own accounts completely, I would spend up to 2 hours sometimes at a bank to submit documents or to get petty cash or whatever it might be. This was in the early days. So, you know, if you are in the CBD area and you're discovering that there are certain branches that are just overcrowded, choose, again, look then 5 minutes in either direction, excuse me, in either direction, to find further bank branches that are a little bit further away, but not too far away, okay? And to avoid complications, it is truly, in my opinion, as a CFO, and I think there are a few CFOs that are on here today, finance directors, however you want to call yourselves, you need to be able to communicate with the bank branch. And I say that because you are probably going to be the most stable employee within that organization, because you might initially have a bit of turnover with your local office in regards to personnel, in regards to people that you might entrust as administrators, or even your corporate service providers that at any point in time you could terminate those agreements. So it is critical that you have communication with a relationship manager in China, which will probably help you to filter a lot of the banks out. Because if you look at the large Chinese banks, you will, Bank of China, ICBC, you will find that many of the relationship managers don't speak a word of English, so that if at any point in time you want to call them, you have no one to talk to. You want to be able to choose a bank branch that has enough foreign invested clients in them that they will have people on staff on rotation, because relationship managers was change at banks, that speak English. Okay, you want to have that easy communication. Okay, in addition to that, I just want to highlight, because there is one bank that I like a lot because of its communication capabilities. It's Bank of Shanghai, because they have an international department where you have the key relationship managers sitting up there, and then you have your communication with your local branch. But at any point that you have issues with communication, you can always go to those key relationship managers to help. Okay, so you've got to figure out a bank that offers these types of solutions, and there are banks that offer those solutions. You just have to know which ones do. Okay, so what's the tendency? Generally speaking, what do foreign investors choose? So normally the first step for most foreign invested companies is that they will choose the bank where they already have an existing relationship in their home jurisdiction. They will check if that bank has a branch in China. If they do, they will go through the relationship manager in the home jurisdiction to open the account in China. Okay, but there are still a lot of banks that don't exist in China yet. So you've got to figure out if your bank has a branch in China, yes or no. Where is it? Is it convenient? Because if the bank branch of that bank is only in Shanghai and you're going to set up in Shenzhen, really doesn't make sense. So you've got to understand the logistical side of that bank. Do they have banking partners in China? Ask with whom. Can they refer you to someone? And then all that communication goes with your bank from your home jurisdiction. That's probably the easiest thing to do. But you got to ask the questions. You got to ask the tough questions. And you got to have a contact person locally. Do not depend on that relationship manager in your home jurisdiction to be your relationship manager for your China company. It just, at one point, the guy will explode and say, I'm not your relationship manager for China. I'm your relationship manager for the UK, for the US, or whatever. Stop asking me about China. Go to that contact in China. All right. In terms of the Chinese banks, and this is probably where my bias is now going to come in, and I apologize for my bias, but that you'll understand that when I explain my personal experience, is Chinese banks are a lot easier to work with. Okay, the application processes are easier because the Chinese banks are the banks of the People's Bank of China. So when you open the accounts, it's more straightforward. Just generally, the operational procedures are also more straightforward because they have the ability to offer more products and services than the international banks do in China. Okay. So, and obviously, if you are transacting predominantly domestically in China, you will also find that your vendors, your suppliers, your customers, your third-party providers will probably be working mostly with domestic Chinese banks, helping then to facilitate those transfers to be a lot quicker and easier as well. Okay. The last point on this slide is Chinese banks generally offer greater bank account security. This is what I've been told. So I've added in here. I can't vouch for that, but that would be something that you may want to discuss with the banks. What type of security do you provide if I were to open an account with you? Okay. So understanding the Chinese banking system. Okay, I just want to explain to you the intricacies of it. So for your information, there is one central bank, the People's Bank of China. The People's Bank of China approves the opening of your bank accounts. Okay, and they are the ones that issue all the rules and regulations around banking in China. You've got 3 policy banks, you've got 5 state-owned commercial banks, and then you've got 12 joint stock commercial banks plus the foreign banks, etc. I mean, they're definitely, when I give you these numbers, it is related to operational banks in China. There are obviously a lot of banks in China, but many of the foreign ones are just very simply representative offices that may have 2, 3, 4, 5 employees servicing companies, clients from overseas, but they don't have a license to be operational banks. And so they're working with local banking partners, and they would probably tell you, we can't help you, we can't open an account for you, but we've got Bank of China or ICBC as a banking partner, and we can help you to open those accounts with them, okay? So like I said, the first step is talk to your overseas bank, understand their capabilities in China, and then follow through with that and have those conversations and that communication. Accounts. So there are various types of accounts that you can set up. So today I'm going to be talking about Renminbi Basic General. I won't touch on specialized because specialized accounts really refers to temporary accounts, what do you call that? You can also open up accounts in China without having an entity in China, so directly from your overseas companies. Those are all specialized accounts that have certain criteria attached to them. I'm not going to touch on that because today we're talking about setting up a company in China and what it relates to in terms of operations. Then we've got loan accounts and capital contribution accounts. So I'll touch on those last two as well. So let's start off with capital contribution and loan. Very simply, the capital contribution account is purely set up for your registered capital that we spoke on Tuesday about, and that enters the capital contribution account only. It can only go in that account, okay? Foreign debt loan, which again, I explained that concept. It's the amount of money, it's the difference between the registered capital and the total investment. It's called the foreign debt loan. That enters the loan account only. When you are incorporating your company in China, the only account you will open initially is the registered capital account, because foreign debt will only be brought in once all the registered capital has been used up. So that loan account, if needed, doesn't have to be needed, if needed, will be opened up later on, and you have to calculate at least 25 working days again to open that account. Then you've got the beautiful Renminbi Basic or general account. So I call it Renminbi Basic. Other people might call it the general account. I call it the Renminbi Basic account because that is what the government uses as a terminology. And I will explain what that means. So in China, you can only have one Renminbi Basic account. So it is vital that you choose the right bank account, the right bank for that account, because you can't close it down. Can't exchange it. Capital accounts can be changed. Renminbi Basic, you can't. Once it's opened, it's opened. So the Renminbi Basic account is your transactional account. It's where all of your operational business is going to run through, okay? Working capital, registered capital enters the capital account. For 2-3 months, you have to show proof of expenses, and then you can do an exchange from the capital account to the Renminbi Basic account. And the money is then automatically exchanged from whatever currency you put it into the capital account into Renminbi. You can have general accounts that are in foreign currency. But ultimately, if you are a small business, if you are transacting from overseas and you need Renminbi to pay off your expenses in any case, when you invoice the overseas company, you receive the overseas funds in your Renminbi Basic account for a transaction. It will be automatically converted upon arrival, okay? The Renminbi Basic account is also used for dividend repatriation, okay? What are the types of payment options? Well, you've got online banking, which is the website of the banks. You've got branch banking, which is face-to-face at the bank. And then you've got the direct connectivity, which is the WePays and the Alipays that will be connected to your bank account, okay? This is all for domestic Renminbi payments. Cross-border payments is where difficulty arises, and I can't even explain to you the difficulties that arise, but I will. I'll try to be as clear as I possibly can in terms of this. So I'm going to use Woodburn as an example because it makes it easier, I think, when I provide you guys with examples. So in terms of our business, when our clients are operational in China, we have a service agreement between Woodburn Shanghai and that operation in China, and then we invoice domestically, meaning we issue VAT invoices. Invoices are in renminbi. When you're transacting from one Chinese company to another Chinese company, you can only do that in renminbi. You invoice in renminbi, you receive renminbi. There are VAT liabilities surrounding that, and the money goes into your renminbi basic account. Very simple, very straightforward. Cross-border payments, on the other side, are more complicated. So when Woodburn Shanghai is invoicing a client for the first time and they have no entity in China, we have to invoice, obviously, the shareholding company, which is an overseas entity. It means that the agreement will be with the overseas entity, and our invoice is just a normal invoice, whether you create it in Word, you create it in Excel, and that goes off to the client. We then receive payment to the renminbi account, renminbi basic account, in foreign currency. The bank holds that payment until we come along with 2 copies of the service agreement with our original CHOP on it and 2 copies of the invoice with our original CHOP on it. The bank will review those agreements. If everything is A-OK, they will then release those funds that have arrived into our renminbi basic account, doing the conversion, and we can discuss what conversion rate to use with the bank. Tedious. You cannot imagine how tedious that is for every single payment. So if I get 3 payments from one client, I have to give 3 times 2 agreements, 2 invoices for each payment. Okay? It is tedious. It is a pain. All right? And usually once the funds have arrived, which it does take maybe, I don't know, let's say maximum 3, 4, or 5 working days, it will take another 3, 4, or 5 working days once you've submitted those agreements and invoices to release the funds into our account. All of these applications of the agreements, invoices have to be submitted in original to the bank. Now, what's fortunate with us is that originally, in the first few years, we had to do this in person. Now we've developed a relationship with our relationship manager where we can just courier these things. We don't have to spend time traveling to the bank branch. So it makes it a lot more convenient to just courier it. Not very convenient when me, who holds the company chops, holds the agreements, issues the invoices, is not sitting in China, right? I have to courier from where I am in Europe there. So there is that inefficiency because I'm protecting my company chop and I'm protecting certain contracts and agreements. But that's just something I got to live with. All right. And that's something, if you guys decide to operate similarly in order to protect your business, you'll also have to live with. There will be delays in actually getting the funds in your accounts, and you have to be prepared for those delays and how it might affect your ongoing business. I've talked about me getting money from abroad, but it's the same. If I have to pay a supplier abroad, I have to get that first service agreement approved by my tax officer, which can take months. So whenever you know that you're going to have recurring invoices received from overseas to you in China, to get that service agreement, which my recommendation would be an ongoing one, open-ended, no time limit, you get it approved by your tax officer, which can take months on end. Then you have that first invoice. You're gonna have to expect months before that first invoice is paid. But once that first agreement and invoice is paid, the recurring invoices should be very quick because that original agreement was approved. But it is also very painful. It's tedious. You have to bring the original service agreement, shops, invoice to the tax bureau, get approval, taxes have to be paid, you then go to the bank, and it all has to be done in person, unless you develop a relationship with the bank and you can start doing couriering of those original documentations, okay? So what I wanna say about the cross-border payments, this is the painful part of banking in China. And it's like that with all banks. However, if you develop a good communication with the bank, you can create efficient operational procedures to make this smoother and less painful. But if you don't have that ability and you don't have a relationship manager, it is going to be tedious. Also, don't forget foreign exchange controls in China. Okay, this is also what causes a lot of the delays of getting money in from overseas and getting money out to overseas. Okay, so the banks and the financial institutions, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this, they have to report all transactions of more than 50,000 renminbi. It goes to the State Administration of Foreign Exchange. Okay. Banks also have to report any overseas transfers by individuals of 10,000 US dollars. Okay. So all of these types of transactions have to be reported, okay, which is also crazy and causes delays when you're receiving or paying out. Okay. So be wary also of how you're invoicing and the values of those invoices. So I'm now going to share with you my experience in China. And I am biased. I will openly say it. I am biased because of my experience. And I openly admit that when I talk to companies about banks in China, I do base a lot of my advice on my experience. So I started off because we had been banking for over 35 years with HSBC in Hong Kong. We automatically decided to utilize HSBC as our bank in Shanghai when I arrived in 2003. I then developed a 15-year relationship with HSBC and actually had no issues. We just, dealt with the regulations in terms of documentation. And you've got to imagine back in 2003, my presentation today would have been very different. The rules and regulations were absolutely different, okay? It was more tedious even back then than it is today. Today, it's actually getting a lot easier. So I suddenly get an email from HSBC, and it was a generic email saying that they no longer wanted to service me, and I had 30 days to basically transfer my capital from my various accounts into a new bank. And I honestly thought the email was a joke, so I deleted it. I thought it was a spam, and I couldn't believe it. And I was, my relationship manager would have called me, right? And I then 2 weeks later get another email, and I'm like, you know what? I think I have to give a call. It's strange that I'm getting these emails. And the email was true and valid. And I now had 2 weeks to change everything. I was able to get an extension, which the bank wasn't happy about. And their reasoning was because for them, I was too small of an organization. 15 years of China operation, I was not small. But to the eyes of HSBC at that moment in time, because HSBC was doing a restructuration, they were becoming picky on small, medium-sized clients. And they were trying to just basically let go and focus on the big names. I had 2 weeks to convert. I didn't even have the time to choose. I just went to the bank branch opposite from my office building, which was ICBC. We quickly opened the accounts, transferred the funds. But I can't tell you the anxiety I had, making sure everything was transferred properly, accordingly, and all of that. What I have discovered since that experience is actually the efficiency processes with the local banks are much easier than with I'm going to compare it with HSBC because I don't know Standard Chartered or any of the others. And actually, I now vouch for local banks because I do see that the efficiency processes with whichever accounts you want to operate with are much easier once you're open and you're running. But this is what I want to highlight through my experience. It seems nowadays that with the international banks, they choose you versus you choosing them. When you go to a Chinese bank, they'll take you on. I mean, if you've got the documents right there and then, they'll open the account, go through the whole procedure, and within 25 and 30 working days, you've got your account opened, okay? With the international banks, it doesn't seem like that anymore, which is why it is so important that you have open dialogue with these banks and ask them, what is my security with your bank? And just use my case study as an example. Are you going to shut me down one day? What are your criteria to maintain me as a client? Because I've heard of a story of a friend of mine who went through XYZ experience. Share it. I don't mind if you do. This will help you to create an open dialogue with your bank. Okay, that I find that is so critical for everybody to have. Okay, I don't want anyone to experience what I experienced now 6, 7 years ago, 8 years ago maybe. Okay, you want to be able to have a banker that you can bank with. You want to have a relationship manager. You want to be able to feel secure that your money is sitting in an account and you're not going to be told that in 30 days you got to move out. This won't happen with the local banks. It could happen with the international ones. I can't vouch for it. Again, I'm not a banker. All I'm doing is sharing my experience. But you've got to have that open dialogue. Another experience that I found, and again, I'm contradicting myself here, but I think it's really important, is a client of mine in Tianjin decided to go with a local bank. And he had already an employee on the ground who just went to an ICBC around the corner that she had had experience with a previous company and liked it. And as we were talking with the bank, we actually discovered that 95% of that bank branch's clientele were only domestic companies. And so they had very minimal experience in managing foreign investors' China company accounts, meaning that they were not used to opening registered capital accounts because domestic companies don't have those accounts. Okay, so even when you choose a branch of any local bank or whomever, you want to know that they've got experience working with foreign investors, China companies, okay? Because there are additional accounts that will be set up for those, all right? So you want to check on that and have that dialogue. So this is the action plan that I have for all of you. Even from wherever you're sitting in the world, you have the ability to have Zoom conversations with a variety of banks where you can compare service level as well as communication. Okay? Now be prepared, because the banks, whomever you work with, they will want to understand your business plan. They will want to understand your registered capital for that investment. They will want to understand what type of transactions will be running through the company. They may even want to understand a little bit your head count. It's normal. They're gonna, because that's their KYC process. They'll want to know a bit of background of what you're planning to do in China. Then take the presentation that I did today and use that as leverage, because now you've got knowledge, and ask them the questions. How many accounts am I going to be needing? What are each of the accounts going to be used for? What services can the bank provide me? Can you offer me a loan if I will need a loan in 5 years' time? What are the documents for the account opening process? What are the documents needed for opening the accounts? Do you need to see the original legal representative passport? Do you need to see and meet the legal representative, or can we do everything through a Zoom phone call? For any transactions, from an operational perspective, will you need to see again the legal representative passport? Because there are some banks that every single time you remit registered capital, because if you decide, let's say, on 100,000 US dollar, and you're going to split that out into five remittances over 5 years, each time you remit capital, do you have to show the original legal rep passport? There are some banks that do require this, which is very inefficient. Where will you need the legal rep signature? Is there a Chinese and English online banking system? And more importantly, are they synchronized? i.e., if My staff goes into the Chinese version. Is that synced when I go into the English version? Can notifications be received? So I think this is really important to know. If you're going to receive money from overseas, if you want to get updates on domestic payments received, can you get notifications, number one? And how are you going to get those notifications? Will it be by email? Will it be by SMS? If it is SMS, all banks require a local Chinese phone number, or can you do it by WeChat? Okay. If you're using any of those systems like WeChat, is there security behind the content being passed through? Bank signatories, what options do we have? Can we have, you'll have to have a minimum of 2 signatories on all overseas transactions. So will that be a signature? Will it be the legal representative CHOP that I just told you guys about yesterday? Or will it, and the finance CHOP is mandatory, okay? Could you also have multiple signatories? Outbound payments, service fees or dividends, or trade transactions. What is the document list? You should know that up front so that you can prepare yourself as you are building up your operational guidelines to know, okay, when I transact with XYZ, I'm going to have a service agreement because the bank requires it. I'm going to have an official invoice because the bank requires it. And are there any other documents? Knowing this will help you in your negotiations with your clients or your suppliers, okay? Because you don't want to go back to a supplier and say, oops, sorry, my bank now requires this. It's going to take forever to get those stuff. You want to be prepared and organized and have this up front, okay? This is just a couple of questions, guys. This is just a few questions that I'm going through with you that you should utilize as your interview with each of the banks that you're communicating with to know how it's going to function. Now, for those of you that messaged me earlier to say that you spent a lot of time, I'm assuming you went through all these questions. So it's common sense for you, but for some reason, for a lot of people, when they go into China, it's not. This is your homework. This is what you need to do before you set up your company. You need to decide on your bank before you take that step. And that's not my homework. I can make introductions. I can refer you to relationship managers that I know. Absolutely. No problem. But you have to have that call. You have to have that communication. You have to be the one that makes that decision, not me. Okay? So I want you guys to tell me, what are your takeaways from today? Let me know. So Pascal's is the general complexity of banking. Hari is research, research, research. Absolutely, love that. Anybody else? Yongi says, do my homework. Tanya, you made a lot of comments a little bit about cross-border and that you had a similar discussion with HSBC. Guys, I'm not, again, I have a lot of clients that have gone with HSBC. So I don't want to sound negative towards them. I do sound negative because of my experience, and I apologize for that. But I do have clients who do go with HSBC. It's just you've got to do your homework to see whether they're the appropriate bank for you. Okay. Anybody else got takeaways? So I'm gonna. There is one question from Yong Yi, and Yong Yi, I'll answer that in the QA that you listed right at the beginning of the presentation. So I'll get to that one, because it's a good one. But just a little bit about how we can help you. So again, I'm not the one choosing your bank, but I definitely have contacts at a variety of different banks. If you also tell me that you know where you want to be located and you want me to do a bit of research on what bank branches are around the neighborhood, and then also to give a call to those branches to see whether there are relationship managers, then I can do that as well. All the other services I've kind of gone through in the last few days, but just remember, if you want to jump on a call with me, no more than 15 minutes to kind of get a better understanding or explain to me a little bit what's happening with you. We can have this kind of game plan session to go through it. I'm going to type in this link now. Here, that goes straight into my diary. You can also connect with me on WeChat. I'm going to give you that right here, or per email. Here we go. And then just connect with me on LinkedIn. If you can't find me on their LinkedIn, it's because I've got 2 names. So you can just search with that, and then you can connect with me. So I'm going to start with the questions. There's one question that's popped in, which is from Yongyi, which is, what if I don't want to register a company in China, but I just need a bank account for money transactions? So Yongyi, excellent question. You can, from your home jurisdiction, set up I forget the term for it, a non-account something or other. I don't have the name on the top of my head because I don't do those so often. But you can do that. There are criteria that you need to abide by, and each bank will have different criteria to open those accounts. What you will have to do as your homework piece is understand whether you can transact in those accounts and how you will be able to take that money out, because you don't have an entity to take it out, to go through that process of tax and whatnot. So there is this possibility. I want people to be aware. You don't have to set up a company in China. You can actually open an account from your overseas entity. There are restrictions and criteria to do that. And just for your information, a lot of those documents have to be submitted in original. So that's how we help the clients, is that you send us your original documentation and we can provide it to the banks. Pascal is asking, may I ask you a question which is a little bit off topic always? You've talked about physical presence for opening a bank account in the current COVID-19 situation. Considering the whole process of incorporation, so everything from applications and tax and whatnot in the current COVID, is the physical presence of the legal representative necessary in any of these steps? No, it's not. So, well, I say it's not. If you register in Shenzhen and you choose a local bank there, it is. But ultimately, it depends on where you're going to be setting up, Pascal. So I'm going to use Shanghai. If I use Shanghai as an example, no, not needed whatsoever. Your outsourced provider can do all of those functions on your behalf. So the legal rep will not have to appear. We've had a company we set up in Wuxi. They used HSBC. All the bank account opening process could be done through Zoom and a video recording. And then all the tax procedures thereafter were done by us in terms of the further steps once the incorporation is done. So no, you don't need the legal rep. You don't need any foreign or anybody from the corporate management to come in. The legal rep will only be needed for those Zoom calls or to do a videotaping. Yongyi, Yuheng, I appreciate you so much. It is called a non-resident account. Thank you so much. So if you're looking to not set up a company, you can set up a non-resident account. Thank you for the terminology. Pascal, I hope I answered your question. Yongyi, tell me if I answered your question. There's nothing that's popped in thus far. So I'm just going to keep going. Again, guys, if you want to set up a 15-minute game plan session with me, let me know. I'm happy to jump on a call with you. Again, guys, we've set up a WeChat China Roadmap community. We're a small group at the moment, but it is expanding day by day. And if you'd like to join the community, add me on WeChat. My ID is KNCOLUCCIA. And it's a community where I hope people interact, but I also post a lot of China news updates that I think are pertinent to the people on the community. I post also about our webinars. I do videos on there to give tips. I also post publications and articles and things like that. So if you guys are interested in joining that community and meeting other people, then just add me on WeChat. And then please, since all of you that are on here today are interested in setting up in China, please be prepared for our upcoming webinar series, which will be the last week of November, all about managing your accounting and tax in China. So I'll be doing, again, a 5-day series on benefits of the preferential tax policy for SMEs. I will be talking about VAT and invoice file systems. I'll be talking about how to avoid a tax audit. I'll be talking about implementing internal control systems, and I'll be talking about profit repatriation strategies. Okay, so you can already sign up for these on our website, woodburnglobal.com/events. I think this is a great follow-up series for those of you that are interested in establishing an entity to understand, once your entity established, how do you manage your accounting and your tax thereafter. And I will be following up with that one on HR. So how do you manage your payroll and your employee systems as well. So I'll be doing that separately, probably in December at some point or early January. So sign up for it, woodburnglobal.com/events. So that's all from me, guys. It's been a wonderful 5 days. For those of you that have joined all 5 days, amazing. Thank you so much. And definitely there are some of you that have joined all 5 days, so that's been absolutely brilliant. And I hope again to see you very soon. And you know, I'm always looking to get to know you guys more, so please do jump on a call with me, and it'd be great if I can help you or help you along in your China journey. Take care and see you all again very soon. Bye.